Retirement isn't just a financial decision, it's an identity transition. In this episode of Beyond Retirement, Dr. Andi Simon explains why people struggle after leaving work. When structure disappears, people often feel lost between who they were and who they're becoming. The key? Curiosity, community, and intentional design. Retirement isn't an ending. It's a stage where you get to choose who you want to become next. Let's get to it. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Beyond Retirement. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Dr. Andi Simon, who's a corporate anthropologist. She studies what happens when work ends, but life doesn't, and why retirement has become one of the most misunderstood and emotionally complex transitions of our time. She's a founder of Simon Associates Management Consultants, an award-winning author, and a global keynote speaker. And she helps leaders understand culture, identity, and transition more clearly. Her work reframes retirement, not as an ending, but as a deeply human identity shift, one that requires observation, reflection, and intentional redesign. Andi, welcome to the show.
What a pleasure to be here. What a nice introduction. Thank you.
I'm really happy that you're here. And I introduced you as a corporate anthropologist. I'm going to guess that many of the listeners don't know a lot more than I do about anthropology in general. Which is that it's primarily the study of people, I guess, cultures, languages, physical and biological characteristics, and society. Is that right?
Pretty close. That sounds really good. We do it in a particular way, and it is a discipline developed often in smaller scale societies. Of course, we've done it for a long time in complex societies, but a lot of it is through participant observation and an assumption that if you talk to people, they will tell you stories that will reflect what they think they're doing. And then you will observe them and wonder how that connects to the story they told you, because often they are disconnected and there are gaps there. And so it's an interesting field. I've been in it for my entire career, but I fell in love with it in undergraduate school and just... People say, you're still doing it. I said, no, I am it. I don't do it. I just see the world through the eyes of an anthropologist who's an observer and enjoys seeing how people solve problems and do it sometimes in very different fashion.
And so is corporate anthropology then just simply the study of people in the business setting?
Well, that came about. I was an academic for a decade, and then I, by chance, got into banking to help them change. And that became sort of my area of expertise. And I spent 14 years in financial services under deregulation and 7 years in healthcare. And when I went into my own business, my PR firm said to me, oh, you're a corporate anthropologist that helps companies change. And I said, John, that's exactly what I am and what I do. At the time, it was 2002, I don't think there were 10 of us. It's a growing field. And people say to me, I thought you studied small scale societies. And I said, what makes you think a business isn't a small scale society? It has rites of passage. What is onboarding other than a ritual? And it has rites of exit called retirement. And there are all kinds of things in between. Who eats lunch together? What happens in the lobby when people enter? The humans are meaning makers. And we don't just work. We give the work meaning. And so I've had a wonderful career. It's 24 years now. Really understanding how companies have designed their solutions and had to change them. And you think about the last 20 years, we've had a recession, we've had a pandemic, we've had Doge, we've had all kinds of transformations, some expected and some not, that have forced us to rethink our business.
And I think maybe the people that don't or aren't open to rethinking their business are the ones that kind of get lost along the way.
And today with AI, people are either their heads in the ground, that's not for me, it's already here, or they're wait and see folks, or they're like myself, early adopters and can't wait to see how the opportunities are here. It's not a problem. The question is, what are you going to do with it? And that requires some ingenuity, and that's what people are all about. So how clever are you?
I hope that's a rhetorical question because I'm not going to say how clever I think I am. So from an anthropologist perspective, what makes retirement such a culturally complex transition?
Oh, I was hoping you'd start with that question because, in some ways, this book, Rethink Retirement, came about because neither my husband nor myself nor me want to retire. And I said to him, I'm sort of ready for a new piece of research, and I'm really curious about what is this thing called retirement, because you and I are defining ourselves as we're not going to. So what are we missing? And so I started to interview people to understand how they were addressing this thing called retirement. Some were excited, some were depressed, some were going to travel around the globe in their boat and discover, what they've always wanted to do. Others sold their business and discovered that in 2 years they no longer had an office and nothing to do. And then some people had a good plan, only to discover that they didn't really plan the day. They planned the next years, but how many trips can you take? And each day I go to the gym, I come home, I have my coffee, and then I have nothing to do. And so the complexity of it was so intriguing as an anthropologist. This is a liminal stage. This is an identity transition. Could I add perspective at a culture that doesn't have any structure? Think about it. When you're growing up, what are you going to study in high school or college? What are you going to be when you grow up is a defining identity for you. And you get a job. Maybe you switch jobs, but you begin to craft who I am in relation to something called work. And then you retire. And humans need an identity. They need to know who they are. And so they go through what we call a liminal stage between what they were and what they're becoming, which isn't clear. And the most dangerous place for people is betwixt and between. But you haven't quite arrived, but you're not quite sure where you're going to arrive. And so I really do think that this is a time for us in the academy to understand the complexity of what people are doing as they're leaving the workplace. And many score. How do you pre-retire? How do you get people prepared? What happens in the office when people leave with all of the wisdom they take with them and the culture as well? Then how do you go into this? Are you doing it with your spouse or your partner? Is there changes for the couple? And all of the changes come into stages. Some of the things that I've learned is that the honeymoon is a terrific time. I don't knock it. You've retired, made it. Yay. And I'm going to do all these wonderful things I've got planned, and that's my plan. And then the honeymoon, about a year or so, starts to wear off. And then the meaning. Now, for some people, I met women who are happy playing mahjong, canasta, pickleball, and having lunch. Bless their hearts. And they often go to a senior living place with their spouse who is not happy at all because he doesn't play pickleball, mahjong, canasta, or anything else. So you have a really interesting transition time. And then you have this aha moment where, is this all there is? Now, remember, people are retiring younger, living longer, and a third of your life could be in this stage betwixt and between. And so the things that we became really aware of in the storytelling was how they began to transition and began to settle, I'll call, into that awakening stage where they went into the next phase beyond the honeymoon. And now we got to figure out, who am I? And what do I do and how do I manner? And so the pillars of being successful as a person were really identical. Who am I? How do I structure my day so I know I'm meaningful? What's my purpose? And who do I have? One woman who I met has 18 things on her to-do list and nothing is getting done. And I said, so what's your meaning? As opposed to how are you transacting things? And the last part is, who are my friends? Who's my community? One woman in the book, I love her story. She was a wealth manager, helped everyone else retire, and decided it was time for her. And then she discovered that all the friends in the office didn't want to talk to her, had nothing to say to her after she became retired. She moved into a new territory. And they weren't exactly happy about her leaving and them not. All the interesting dynamics of this. But she said, I have no friends and I don't know how to make them. And so it's a very interesting time. So then you sort of begin to reorient yourself, begin to build a new community slowly, begin to learn new things. And the people who I worry about are the people who are lonely, the people who can't seem to figure out or have nobody to guide them, no mentors, no role models. They're trying to make it up on their own. And I heard a story last week at a wonderful women's event of a professor, and was an academic, who left and retired and 2 years later committed suicide. And she just simply couldn't find any purpose in being out of the academy and couldn't find any way to get back into it. And I do think our society is going to have to struggle with the meaning that we're giving to this word called retirement, because being retired makes it feel like you're in a state of belonging. But to what? So that's my journey on this. And since you want to know more about retirement other than the financial, we rarely spoke about the financial part. In all of the interviews, it was about life. And how they prepared was fine, but that wasn't meaningful. It was, what am I going to do? So it's a real interesting question to ask your listeners, your audience, but also each other. What were we going to do?
That's it exactly. And part of the reason I started questioning retirement and what to do is because when I was getting ready to retire, people at work were saying, "Oh, I can't retire. My job is my life." And I thought that was really sad. I was really happy they loved their job, but your life is so much more than your job. And that's what I tried to focus on. And what I want to bring to people is that there is so much more out there, but you've got to be able to turn on that imagination and drag it out of yourself, because we all have things we want to do if we just know how to dig it out. And I think the digging it out is the part that people are struggling with, because they've spent so many years, as you've said, identifying with the job and who that makes them, that they don't know who they are outside that. And
Yes.
how do they, how do they do that? How do they figure out who they are? What have you discovered about people who transition well into retirement? What patterns are there?
Well, the one word I use is agency. They begin to take charge. They understand it in a way that others fumble. And it is interesting to watch. One story in there is of a couple. While she had cancer, she was recovering, and he had sold his business to his son, and he was a client of ours, and had become friends. And we talked a lot about his journey, because as he's one who had a smaller office and a smaller office and then no office, and realized his son didn't need him at the office at all. And now he had to reconstruct, but he took charge the same way he would have taken charge in the business. And she was a school nurse, and she took charge. And the two of them realized that this was their time together to do what was important. And they have a camper, and they drove all the way up to Nova Scotia, stopped here and spent a night at our farm. Then they went up to Alaska. And so they have journeys. They're on a trip with friends. They're playing golf. She's knitting hats. And when you talk to them, they don't have enough time for all the things they would like to do, but together, they have, I'll call it agency. They've taken charge of this new time and created what mattered to them with intention. And I think intentionality is extremely important. Here's the time when nobody's telling you what to do. It's almost like you're a grown-up for the first time. It sounds bizarre, right? But there's no daily activities. There's no meetings that are structured. You are now in charge of your day. And it's not an optional kind of thing. You have to really take charge of it. The structure, I have a section in there, freedom versus structure. You thought all the freedom was going to be wonderful, but you didn't realize that it drains you.
Yep.
And structure energizes you. Now, you can ask why. I'm not quite sure I have an answer, but humans need form in order to really be free to do what they want to. They need some bookends. And so that becomes a real interesting piece of it. The people, you asked the question about who seems to be able to tackle it. They define themselves as meaning and purposeful quickly. What's my purpose? And now I've met men and women, both of whom want to now spend time with their kids or their grandkids. They weren't able to do it while they were working. The disappointing part is that their grandkids have already gone past the point where there's much to do with the grandkids. And their kids are all, by and large, living their own lives. Now, the challenging part is when the elders become ill and the children have to become their caregivers. That becomes a different relationship. But when they're both all very helpful and healthy, your aspiration to be able to spend time with your grandkids can be disappointed if, my grandkids are 20, 19, and 16. They don't need me. And so even trying to get together for the holidays requires everybody to give up whatever they're doing and come together to be a family. But it's intentional, and with understanding. The people who I do worry about, apart from those who are alone, I find many of the women who are solos need someone to talk to. And if they were professionals, they need to create a new community differently than the people who are perfectly happy playing mahjong, canasta, and pickleball. And they're just different. And I've met both. The woman who was a professional and left was so disappointed that her subordinate never called her. And the disappointment that this woman, whose subordinate, who she lifted with her, didn't see any obligation to her after she had left. And that was sort of one of those aha moments of disappointment. And she also knew that she wasn't going to be able to play golf or pickleball the way they did. So she had to begin to recreate a new world for herself. And you have 75 million boomers in the United States. I know you have a lot in Canada too. There are going to be a lot of people looking for purpose. And one thing I haven't talked about is the not-for-profit world. I belong to a women's virtual community, and there was a conversation about how hard it was getting positions in not-for-profits to be purposeful and have a place. And then I spoke to not-for-profits who said, we have to hire someone just to manage all the retirees who want to come do work with us. And she said, and they don't know anything about what we do or how we do it. And it's not so easy to just be a good giver. Money would be fine, time maybe, but we don't know what to do with them all. And they don't seem to be getting the kind of police they want to give back, but they haven't quite planned how to do it. Does that help you understand what my perspective has been in the learnings we've had?
It does indeed. I like the idea of people needing structure, but not really being aware that they need the structure until it's too late, until it's all gone.
Yes.
And when people asked me what retirement means to me, I've always said it means being able to do what I want to do when I want to do it.
Yes.
Instead of fitting it around everything else. But the key there is that you have to make time to do it. You have to schedule it. Even if it is all a free day, you've still got to put that on the calendar. And a lot of people forget that.
Yes. And there's not a lot of training ahead of time. It's not as if you're in prep course to get organized. That's why we are starting a masterclass and a workshop because in person and virtual. Because if nothing else, I like to share what we've learned, and they learn from each other. This workshop I had with 3 people who never knew each other. They were talking to each other as if they were old friends because they were sharing deep thoughts about who am I. And of my 18 things to do, which ones are the ones that matter the most? And then how do I make sure and I often say, do you journal? Do you record the day? And do you give thanks to the day? Do you give thanks to someone else? Some of the tools from business are very useful. Gratitude cannot be underestimated. Did you have a good walk today? Did you, go study, I don't know, anything you might like, birds, photography, and, all those things you've been waiting to do, go do them. And don't say someday. Today is the day. It's okay.
What you said about journaling and being grateful, I think I tend to write down the things that I want to do. They don't necessarily get done. Like the lady you said had 18 items on her list to do and none of them were happening. But at least that means at the end of the day, I know what I was thinking about so that I can aim at it tomorrow again.
Yes. It also helps you sleep. You
well, exactly.
Fresh, right?
Yep. And I think...
Please.
I was going to say, I think that curiosity plays a big role in helping us figure out what it is we're going to do. And I know that you, as an anthropologist, you're curious about everything and why people are doing it.
Yes.
But I think that people don't spend enough time thinking about the why do I want to do this? And I think that would make a big difference sometimes in removing the stress of being retired. Is you just say, why am I feeling like this? And actually answer that question instead of brushing it aside.
That is a very big question because humans are copycats. And often they are copying what other people are doing on the assumption that that's what I should be doing too. Right? I'm retired, therefore I should. But you're asking the why question is so profoundly important. And that's a good Substack conversation about why are you doing what you're doing now? Is it because others are? Are you copying what they're doing? Or is there something in your own desire to to try it? And I often say, people, the doors are open, walk through them. If you don't like what's there, you come back. A story. There's a couple in the book, and they sold their farm and with great joy retired. 4 months later, she had breast cancer. The unexpected. Not quite a pandemic, but the same fact. 2 years later, she's in recovery, and it's really wonderful, but they're bored to death. And so they're reopening the business they had without the farm and launching it again because they both know how well they do with it, how much fun they have with it, and they're going to figure out how to do it again. And so I give them enormous credit because it isn't a straight line. There's a journey here, and there are detours. But you need to be agile enough. There's an adaptability quotient that's coming out with emotional intelligence. There's an ability to adapt. Your curiosity is a real important factor. And how easy is it for you to change direction when it's not going in the right place? Right?
That's adaptability is not something that everyone is born with, I guess.
There's one other story that I love. Ed Stillman is a wonderful gentleman who's 91 now, but at 58, he retired from 3M. And they gave him a package so he can make it to 65. And he was going to play golf with his buddies and reduce his golf score, his handicap from 14 to 4. And he said he realized that his golf buddies really like to drink while they're on the golf course. And they really like to drink on the 19th hole. And next thing he know, he found himself becoming an alcoholic. And he said, I failed retirement. I had to go find a way to get out of this new life because it wasn't what I wanted to do. His wife said, you have a glass of wine, you have this, you have that, and you're falling asleep. And I don't think this is what you planned. So it's okay to rewire yourself, redirect yourself, test some things. If you want to do that, go for it. But then be wise enough to say, this isn't working for me. I got to go do something else and talk to people. They'll help you.
What do you think that organizations could be doing differently about retirement planning for their staff and succession planning to make things a little bit easier for the people that are leaving? I mean, I know it's not their job it's not the corporation's job to make things easy as people are leaving, but it would be beneficial.
Yes and yes. It's interesting because when the woman who left and her friends were angry that she had gone, reflects something that happens in organizations when somebody leaves, however they leave. And it disrupts the culture inside the place. So if you thought of it in a bigger fashion, it wasn't about taking care of the person who's retiring. It's about really building a culture where staying is important. And understanding that leaving isn't forever. I love, one of the companies has a resource center where you can find projects within the company to work on after you are retired. I like the folks who offer people 2 days in the office on special projects to keep the continuity and the conversation going. The brain drain is not to be underestimated. The people who've been there for some time have carried along lots of insights into customers or products or processes, and they disappear. I don't care how you try succession planning. Their followers cannot be as good as they are at the moment. Maybe they're not that good, but by and large, the people who've kept along have created a place for themselves to have some purpose and value. And so I do think, and I have to give a talk to an HR organization about this because I think that they could begin to think about this differently and prepare people better for understanding what goes on in the retirement. I like the stages idea. First you're going to have a honeymoon, and then you're going to have an awakening, and then you're going to have a restructuring. And I want you to keep coming back and talk to us so that we have work to do together, so you can add value here and we can help you in the journey, as opposed to done, you're out of here. And I also think they could be wise people to help them prepare more effectively. A woman who I met at a networking event said, "My friend is really panicking about retiring." I said, "Well, have him call me. Let's just talk." Who's he going to talk to about it? His wife doesn't want to hear about it. And couples are really interesting because one retires and the other doesn't. Oh my God, their days are completely at odds with each other. So lots to be done.
In my intro, I commented that you think of retirement not as an ending. What would you describe it as to someone who is thinking that it is an ending and has decided that their career has come to an end and that's the way it's going to be?
Well, that's a wonderful question. This is a stage in our lives that we haven't named. It's a not. We're not working, but not what are we? And it's a time where you get to choose what you want to become, which is an unusual state for you through your whole career. And sometimes it's a third of your life. And I think this is a stage that really needs to be culturally celebrated. Whether it's somebody calling it, blue zone or senior living. I've done work in senior living communities, but why that? Why not some new word that really begins to think of this as the best stage of all? Because you are on a very independent track right now. When nobody's telling you what to do, you can really design it the way you'd like. You can experiment with all kinds of things. You can be curious. You can fail. You can succeed, but you're only accountable to yourself. So it isn't about how do I stay busy? It's who am I becoming now that I get to choose? And I can't name it yet, but it's yours for the asking, like you have chosen yours and I have chosen mine. And be happy. And that's the other part. Be happy. This is a state of mind. Your mind does exactly what it thinks you want it to do. So if it's angry, just tell it to be happy. You have freedom. Go enjoy it.
And if in doubt, smile in the mirror. Because your brain will think you're happy.
Create the illusion. Why not? That's all it is anyhow.
So you've talked a little bit about your book. Tell us more about your book.
Well, the book, you can see it behind me here. I mentioned that it came about because we decided not to retire. And in it, I broke the people I interviewed into sections, chapters, about freedom and structure, about time, about all the key things that they were talking about. Fun. This is going to be a time of health. All the expectations that would be important to anticipate. The right time to retire. I have a whole section in there, and 3 beautiful men, who are talking about the struggle for when is the right time to retire. One woman was in the military, and so at 40-ish, after 20 years, she retired. What am I going to do? And so she built her own business and then retired. and how many times there's a woman in there who has been in public organizations, has been in private, has been in healthcare. And she finally, after 4 different roles in her work life, decided it was time to stop, retire. And she said to me, I'm learning how this is tough. It's not so easy. The health ones I had mentioned, the fun ones, are really interesting. Why do you think work is not fun and retirement is fun? This is in your own mind. So if you're going to make this an either or, you better set very high expectations for the fun you're going to have when you're no longer working. But you've spent a whole lot of life being unhappy, not fun. It's hard to make sense sometimes of what people have been thinking about. And then money. You don't want to talk about money, but at the end of the day, I mentioned to you I did 60 interviews before I settled on which ones. Nobody talked about money. They had really come to terms that they had how much money they had. Now the question was, how do I enjoy the period of my life where I can choose what I want to do? And without thinking about all the time, am I spending too much? This couple I mentioned discovered that they had to bucket their spending. And so they had some money that they could be indulgent with and other money that they just couldn't touch. And if they had a good financial planner, and these folks did, they helped them organize their mindset around how to be prudent, but not end up at the end of their days with the last check. And it becomes intentionally thinking about this wisely. Good financial planners, I hope, will use our book to help their customers better plan for their retirement, because it's more than just the money. And to your point, when I started researching this, all I found were videos and podcasts and everything about your money. And I went, my goodness, what do you do once you have the money or you don't have the money? And how do you figure that out? It's not easy. So that's my thoughts. And the book is here. The back part of the book is a workbook. I have a separate workbook, but I built it into this so that you could start to do things to better rethink your retirement. And it really asks the good questions. Who am I? What's your identity? Who do you want to be? How do you define yourself? How do you define your structure of your day? What's a good day look like? And I like that. If you begin, remember, humans are visualizers. If you can see it, you can be it. But if you can't see it, you don't know what it is. And so the book's, back part is all about doing. And if you're going to have purpose, what does that mean? For whom do you matter? Let's sort of start from the simple things. Give me 3 people for whom you matter and how do you matter there. Let's make purpose start with your friends, your family, your church, your organization, somewhere where you can focus your attention. And then, how do you organize and structure your day? How do you have a perfect day? What's a perfect community look like? Who are you looking for? Let's get intentional about it, but knowledgeable as well, that unless you plan it, life will take you where it wants to. And you can do that. There's nothing that says you can't. You can play pickleball, mahjong, and canasta and enjoy life. There's nothing wrong with that. Until it bores you out and you begin to say, this is all it's worth. Not for me, maybe not for you, but for many other people, they're coming up with that realization that life is rich. Let's spend it wisely.
So with your own life, what are you most curious about in what's coming ahead?
Curiosity for me right now is, how do I take this and turn it into experiential learning for people? I don't want to go build, Jim Conley's building hotels out of the Elder Academy. And that's not where I'm at. But I really do love to be an inspirational educator. So I'm curious about where I can begin to offer value. Military, for example. One of the women in there came out of the military, as I mentioned, and lots of men and women are leaving the military in the name of retirement. And lots of corporations want to hire them, but they need to be retrained. And is there value there? Sports, people leaving sports and retired. I have a potential PR opportunity to talk about this, because very often they've been very successful in a very structured world, and now they have lots of money and nothing to organize them. And it's a tragedy when they don't know what to do. And so can I begin to help them see this in a new fashion? So I'm curious about where I can apply this and take both my experience and expertise and make it of value to others. And I'm having fun reaching out to corporations, to associations of financial planners, to chambers of commerce. And I'm getting wonderful responses. Like, really, we need this. And there isn't as if there are a dozen of us doing this. There are some. And it's not a one-on-one coaching. Community is often really cool when you get together a bunch of people going through the same journey. They learn from each other. They're better teachers to each other than I am. And so my curious is where can I take it to? And I don't know. I do know my husband and I will not retire. We will travel. We will do all kinds of wonderful things with our kids and our grandkids, and then we will be valuable to others if we can.
It sounds like a wonderful plan. And do you have any just one final piece of advice that you would give someone who's newly retired and maybe struggling a little bit?
One little piece of advice. Ask yourself, first of all, be patient with yourself. I think that patience, when you're, as an anthropologist, when you enter a foreign country where you don't know the language and you don't know the rituals and you don't know what people think is normal, and that's where you're at, you're in a foreign country, you're going to feel yourself stumbling, saying the wrong things to the wrong people in the wrong way, not being able to answer at a cocktail party. What do? You're going to feel,
Yes.
you're going to really feel stupid. And that's not happy. My wisdom for you is first smile in the mirror, be happy that you have retired, and now begin to think about how can you really, really become what you want to, that you can choose it. Take on agency, be intentional. Those aren't abstract words. Let's own it. And now you're building a business around you. It's a personal brand. Name it anything that makes you happy. But think about it in a way that gives you some idea that this is okay. You're not failing. You're not uncomfortable. You're not sick. You're just going through what we call a liminal stage betwixt and between. It's the most dangerous for humans. You're neither fish nor fowl. And you're neither working nor not working. You just don't know what you're doing. It's okay. And then slowly begin to watch the days turn into meaningful ones. And don't let the doors open and go through them. Try things. There's a woman in one of the coaching sessions that we were doing, and she started to develop a senior tech program at her parents'. You can get the age difference, at her parents' senior living community. And she was so fascinated because she brought this wisdom about Zoom and all kinds of things. And she said, and then I finished and everyone lined up with their cell phones and all they wanted me to do was fix their iPhones. And she said, their level of technology was that my iPhone's not working. Can you help me fix it? At which point she said, so much for Zoom and AI and all kinds of sophisticated things. She said, but there's a purpose there for you, isn't there? And she said, yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way. But I think I'm going to do more of these and see where it takes me. And that's the kind of thing that will make your day grow.
Oh, that's great. I like that. Is there anything else that you would like to tell the listeners about or have them know about you or about your business before we close up?
People, you started the conversation about what's a corporate anthropologist. And I love to listen to stories. So you got a story you'd like to share. My podcast has 438 podcasts about stories that people want to share. My pleasure is helping you be a little anthropological. How can you see, feel, and think in new ways? Can I teach you just to be an observer and not jump at what you're thinking? Listen to the stories and let it help you expand your mind. Here's how your mind works. When you hear a story, your own mind begins to change. It begins to change the story. And so the more stories you can hear, the more you're going to enrich your own. Whatever you do, don't get locked into, no, we don't do that. I've been working for 24 years now with companies, and the first thing they do is hire me, and the second thing they do is tell me we don't do that. And I'm saying, well, you're stuck or stalled. Let's see if we can unstuck you by doing that. And so this is a time for you to do things that you've been waiting to do. Go enjoy yourself. But remember, after a year or so, begin to see how you can organize it and how to reorient yourself so that you don't waste a single day of this wonderful time that's for you to choose. And that's my wisdom.
Beautiful. Thank you very much for being with me today, Dr. Andi Simon. And I will make sure that there's a link to your show and to your book in the show notes. I've really enjoyed chatting with you.
You are a great podcaster. I truly appreciate being here today. Thank you.
And that's it for this episode of Beyond Retirement. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I hope you enjoyed it. Are you ready to start rocking your retirement? Head on over to www.beyondretirement.ca/rocking it and sign up to plan out your own roadmap for retirement. Don't wait till it's too late.